A lot of people ask about the penetration testing process, so I'm going to cover the workflow and logistics at a very high level. This process is pretty similar from company to company, so if you've been involved with penetration testing before, this will be similar to what you're used to. The first step of the process is to have a scoping call where we understand your goals and requirements, and we can put together a statement of work that outlines everything, our understanding of the project and the price associated with that. We'll send over that statement of work to you, and once that is signed, we'll schedule the project itself. About a week in advance of the project, we'll have a kickoff call. On that kickoff call, we'll discuss the environment that we'll be using for testing, as well as the URLs we will be using to access that environment. Specifically, a lot of our customers will test in production environments. A lot of our customers will test in non-production environments. We'll decide on the exact URL we'll use to access that environment, as well as the actual user accounts that we'll be using for testing. It's important to us that we test as many roles as possible and authorization scenarios to make sure user A can access user B's data and company A can access company B's data. And all of those different scenarios we want to test as thoroughly as possible. So we'll discuss the provisioning of credentials and what makes the most sense there. We'll also discuss loading sample data within the application. In a few instances, probably a single-digit percentage, we have applications that are especially hard to use that we're testing, and then we need some sort of back-end process to load sample data into the application. For the most part, we can load that ourselves, but in some cases, we'll want you to load that for us so we can use the application. We'll discuss if there's any IP allow list that we need to be added to, either to access the application itself, especially if it's some sort of dev environment, or if there's any sort of web application firewall that we need to be added to bypass that. And it's pretty common for customers to have questions about that to decide whether they should add us to that or if we should access the application through the web application firewall, just like a real attacker would. And there's trade-offs either way, but we fairly strongly recommend that we do be added to an allow list there and bypass the web application firewall entirely. The reason for that is that it allows us to cover as much as we can and find as many vulnerabilities as we can with the limited time we have. We're trying to protect against every possible attacker in the future that might have more resources or specific payloads that bypass web application firewall rules. And we want to identify as many of those vulnerabilities as we can and put those in your hands so you can decide if you want to fix them or not. Another thing we can do is perform testing after the test is completed through the web application firewall and let you know which payloads were successfully blocked by the web application firewall. But generally speaking, with sufficient time and effort, there's a bypass for most web application firewall rules. So we just generally prefer to be allow listed through those so we can be as comprehensive as we possibly can. We'll discuss if there's anything we should not test or test lightly. So if there's anything that places a high CPU load on the server, or maybe makes an outbound API request that costs you money, maybe it sends real emails to real customers, things like that we want to be sure we avoid. We'll do our best to identify that as we traverse the application, but we also want to give you an opportunity to call that stuff out in case there's something that we may not be aware of there. We will also ask about any areas of concern. So if there are any recent changes to the application or pieces of functionality that are especially security sensitive, we want to be sure we're aware of those so we can focus especially on those pieces of functionality. Another thing we'll discuss on the kickoff call is whether you want to provide source code to us for access and review. A lot of companies just add us to GitHub, or any way you want to provide the sources is fine with us. This definitely isn't required. It's completely optional. It just helps us look behind the scenes and look a little deeper for certain vulnerabilities. Specifically, it helps us look for all the routes that are available within the application, so we just make sure we exercise all of the different code paths. Additionally, if we have questions about some specific functionality around like authentication or a forgot password mechanism or how some token is generated or a potential injection flaw that we're just not able to quite exploit, then we can look behind the scenes and kind of see what's going on at the code level there and see if we can learn anything that helps us formulate those attacks. So again, that's not needed. It's just completely optional and something you can provide if you'd like to. We'll also discuss the best way for us to divide up the reports. In most cases, this is just one report, but in some cases, there's like a web application, a mobile application, an API, and they're all working together. But in some cases, those are developed by different teams, or the customers that will be viewing the reports may only want to see one report, but not the others. So we'll just discuss what makes sense if we want to do one report or multiple reports for any sort of complex situations like that. We'll also follow up with any notes or action items. So if there's any specific things that we need to complete or you need to complete before the testing can get off the ground, usually there's 2 or 3 for each of us. We'll communicate those as well. Customers frequently ask us about the level of effort that is needed for them to facilitate the testing. I would say during the kickoff call and early phases, it's generally pretty easy. It's just a matter of spinning up a testing environment for us and provisioning access. That's usually not too hard for most of our customers. During the testing itself, we usually don't have too many questions, maybe a few back and forth about something that's not working. But again, that's usually not too bad either. I'd say the biggest task is around remediation and any items that you would like to fix after the test is completed. So if there are a variety of issues, maybe some high severity issues, maybe some low severity issues, just deciding which of those you want to fix and fixing them is going to be the biggest level of effort involved with the testing. Usually those are single line of code type changes or single changes to configuration files that aren't too bad, but it kind of can vary depending on the complexity of the issue. So overall, not too bad, but it will take some time to facilitate and the testing and remediate the findings that are identified. Another question we're commonly asked is around our lead time. Basically, when can you start this test? That will vary depending on how busy we are at that time, so don't hesitate to reach out if you have that question. But in general, it's best to schedule stuff further out and for both our sake and your sake and not be doing things in a rush. So at least a few weeks is ideal. So we're able to get it on our schedule and get things off the ground without rushing. So even more than that is even better, but at least a few weeks is generally nice, at least a good amount of lead time. So that covers all of the logistics and workflow that's needed to get a penetration test going with us. Don't hesitate to let us know if you have any follow-up questions or if anything you want to hear more detail on. Just let us know and we'd be happy to help.